This is East Kilbride, a new town in the west of Scotland, not far from Glasgow. Sorry to interrupt your game. What is it, a counting game?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, hello, you're Margot's daughter, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes, I'm just going to see her. Margo MacDonald.
Yes, hello.
I've caught you in the middle of it.
You have indeed. Come in though.
You really are in the middle of things because you're just about to go on holiday, aren't you?
Well, we're hopeful, we're hopeful.
Margo MacDonald is Senior Vice Chairman of the Scottish National Party, in charge of all their strategy.
This is my daughter Petra here.
Hello, Petra. School broken up?
Yes.
Nice.
Have a seat, have a seat.
Thank you. How long have you been here?
Since last September. It's my mother's flat, but I've returned here and we've been here fairly happily, I think.
And you've been like a maniac painting it, haven't you?
Oh, never like a maniac. But yes, I've been painting. I've got a marvellous agent and I've got 2 daughters. And
What, do you mean a political agent is a painter as well?
well, that's why I chose them. That's why I chose them. Other people choose them for their religion. Excuse me a second. Hello? Well, when are you coming up then? Okay then, see you later. Bye. That was my marvellous agent. It's okay, he's coming out with posters and things.
Well, I'll go guess when he comes. But meanwhile, is this your office then?
It's everything. This is the boom. It's, you know, all happens here. It's the office and it's the home. I think it's the only way actually I can operate just now is working from a solid base because the kids are very much part of the whole thing.
But you must have it all the time. I mean, the phone must ring and ring and ring and ring. How do you organise it all?
I don't know. Some people maintain that I don't, of course, organise it all, that I'm mad or disorganised or a nationalist or maniac or something.
Don't you think you might be all those things?
Oh, it's quite true. I could be and not know it. But it seems to work. That's the important thing.
Okay, posters. How do you like them?
Good. I like them. I like them very much. Are we absolutely stuck with this colour?
Yes, I'm afraid so. I'm afraid the constituency will
With
not
her
have
agent Stuart Buchanan, Margo is planning her next general election campaign. This time she's standing for Hamilton. She has already been a Westminster MP. She won a shock by-election victory in 1973, but was unseated 4 months later at the general election.
Well, I like them, but I don't think we should go too contrived on them at all. It's nice and clean cut, and I don't think we should go too contrived.
Yes.
Now, listen, there's another thing I was going to say. Do you see this here? We will reproduce this. Absolutely, definitely. We'll reproduce that come the election. Nice
Yes.
bit, nice bit.
10 years in politics have made her canny and knowledgeable. She misses few tricks.
Please. Well, nothing's changed. That's 10 years ago.
What are the shops like around here anyway?
Pretty good, actually. This is a tremendous place, East Kilbride. You know, it's the most successful new towns in the whole UK.
But you know when you call East Kilbride a new town, how new is a new town?
Well, 25 years. What it did was take overspill mainly from, you know, Glasgow, the very depressed areas in Glasgow and Lanarkshire, and it's been very, very successful. Always been a fairly high wage-earning population, very young population, very ambitious, and it's great.
But successful ought to mean something to do with community. I mean, do you think it's got any sense of community?
Aye, very definitely, because the people who came here had come from very tight communities in Glasgow, and so they brought, I think, the very best of that with them. And as a result, there's never been any bother about trying to graft the community feeling onto East Kilbride.
You're about the best-known Scottish nationalist there is.
Some places.
Why do you want independence for Scotland?
Mainly because I would like Scotland to be Scottish without being self-conscious about it. I would like Scotland to be the sort of place where kids just now who are leaving school can look forward to planning their own lives, who can look forward to what we have been conditioned to believe is a natural and right expectation. That is a decent, well-paying job. And unless we have independence, in other words, unless we control our own economy according to our own resources, our own priorities, our own needs, then we can forget it.
Perhaps it's fairest that fair Margo MacDonald should now be talking to me in London. At least we are both on mutual ground. Since I've lived out of Wales, though, Margo, for the last 20 years, I don't think it's quite the same, because I can't visualise that you'd ever leave Scotland.
No, neither can I. I enjoy coming to London because of the shopping and because there's all sorts of things here, but I come on holidays to London. I come from Scotland, and that's where I want to grow and expand and, if possible, you know, contribute to the whole thing. I don't feel part of London.
Where were you brought up in Scotland?
In Lanarkshire, in various places in Lanarkshire, my mother brought us up, and I started off, in fact, in what was a mining village at that time in my own constituency in Hamilton, and we went to other places round about East Kilbride, and then, like Money and other people, we got our first good house in East Kilbride.
When you say your mother brought you up, what do you mean?
My mother was left with the three of us when she was quite a young woman, and she brought up her family herself.
Did you know your father, do you mean?
Oh yes, yes, but would prefer not to.
So you had a really rather unsettled home life?
Unsettled in some ways, but my mother's a rock. She's a tremendously strong woman, and so therefore in that way I think that my background is very secure, because we knew what the values were, we knew what my mother's ambitions for us were, and we acquiesced anyway in what they were.
What were your mother's ambitions?
We had to do better in life than she had done. We had to have as good an education as could be provided for us. And of course all, or almost all, education in Scotland is state education. But at that time the schools were selective. Well, we had to do well and get into a good selective school, and afterwards we had to go to university or college.
When you say nowadays all schools are comprehensive, aren't they?
Well, the tradition in Scotland, you see, was for the comprehensive school. We called them by fancy names. The old Scottish word was the academy. But everyone went to the academy, although I shouldn't give you the impression that they were comprehensive in intent. They were just that way because there were many more smaller communities and the schools were tightly streamed. Well, that is changing. We've taken on board some of the English ideas as regards the streaming of pupils according to their ability, and we go into the, the setting according to subjects now. We've made a bit of a mess, I'm afraid, of our education, just like the English.
Did you, if your mother brought you up, what did she do to keep you going then, to earn the money?
Well, she took a late training. She had all sorts of jobs, and then she took a late training in nursing. Unfortunately, she became ill after a while. But we never had very much money, but that wasn't terribly important because we were still able to do the important things.
Mm. When you were a little girl at school, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
Oh, a hairdresser, a psychiatrist, a bluebell girl, you name it.
But then, so what did you become when you left school?
A teacher.
A teacher of what?
PE. I became a teacher because I had a fistful of hires, which is our leaving certificate, when I was 16. I was the eldest in the family and my brother was due to go on just after me, and so it seemed at that point a good idea just to get a teacher training. Now, of course, it's a dreadful idea.
Quite. But if you had a lot of academic subjects, why PE, I wonder?
It was a challenge. That was the only thing, that I had really to work at. I know it sounds absolutely incredible, but when I think about it now and analyse my reasons, I didn't have to work terribly hard in English or languages or anything at all like that. But if I wanted to be the best netball player in the school, I had to work at it.
So you've been a fighter from very early on. The difficult things are the things you take on.
No, I'm just determined.
Now, then, when did you get married, Margo?
I was quite young, 20.
20. And then did you give up work when you got married?
Yes, I had my family. I had 2 girls in the first 2 years I was married.
And did you do that positively because you wanted to bring up children? Or
no.
No?
No, I was the same as most other people, I think, round about that age group. I probably got married at roughly the appointed age and had my children at roughly the appointed time after I had been married.
Mm. But then when you had your children, did you then think that you wanted to go on to be a career woman, or did you feel that you wanted to give them a home life?
No. The important thing was that I should devote myself and any training that I had actually as a teacher, because it all comes in very useful when you're bringing up kids. That was the important thing. But I was also a nationalist. I was in the SNP, and it's like any other voluntary organisation. If you once raise your head above the committee table and say, well, I could do it, that's you started. You never get off the merry-go-round. What
got you interested in politics? Was it a home background or what?
Well, I've been asked this and I've had to try and work it out. Was our home a political home? I think it may have been a political home without being a party political home. And I think probably I have always been political without realising it. In fact, when I was a student, I was active in student politics, but I didn't join any political party because I didn't want to know about that sort of thing. I think when I had a real good think, I decided that fundamentally if we wanted to do things in Scotland for ourselves, then it had to be done through a political party, Scottish National Party.
Your marriage has recently broken up,
yes,
hasn't it? Was that because of your political work, do you think, at all? Or?
Well, obviously it impinged, but I think that my husband and I are just typical of people in our own age group. We married pretty young, and there's been a tremendous social revolution in the last 10 years. And people who 10, 12 years ago appeared to be exactly the same are now finding themselves very different. And I think it's that more than anything. You can't just say it was politics.
Is it if you marry young that one of you develops in a different way and you don't?
Yes, I think
keep
it's very
going
common.
together.
You know, I know how many of my own friends are in the same position just now, and no one's to blame. You know.
But do you think you have brought up your children like your mother brought up you? I mean, what kind of mother?
No, I don't think so. Not really. For instance, my mother still tries to get a hold of them, sit them in a corner and teach them how to sing hymns. Things like, I don't do that. I think probably I have tried to be a bit wider in my concepts, a bit more liberal than my mother was. Possibly because I haven't had to work just as hard as my mother did just to keep my head above water. You know, I'm not rolling in money, but I don't think that financially it's just as hard for me, and so therefore perhaps I'm allowed to use my imagination a wee bit more, and I think perhaps my children reap the benefit of that.
Are you at all unconventional about women and men's roles in family life? I mean,
I'm not sure. I've always reckoned that women were better. Is that unconventional?
better at bringing up a family, or better at
Yes.
everything?
Better at bringing up a family, and probably I would imagine running the country too.
Do you find, I mean, what intrudes on your family life are your politics? It must be quite hard to cope with politics because they do take up a lot of time.
Well, I think I managed to keep all the balls in the air, and the girls are now at the stage where certain things they thoroughly enjoy. I mean, they enjoyed your visit to East Kilbride, and it was very good actually, because for the first time their friends were involved. They saw the filming and all the rest of it, and for the first time my girls didn't feel hung up and a wee bit embarrassed because their mother was in the television. And so that's something else now that they can share with me, and the next time a television programme comes up that I'm going to, you know, they can relate to it that bit better. And there's all sorts of things now that, if I can give you an example, one day we went to Edinburgh. We had a school holiday. So away we went to Edinburgh, and we decided we'd start at the castle, we'd walk down the Royal Mile and go to the palace. And when we got to the castle, the men there were signalling each other in their walkie-talkies that I was there. So before we went into each place, like for example the Great Hall, everybody knew that I was coming. So my kids got playing with the axes, nobody else's kids did. And they realised at that point, you know, maybe there was some benefit to having a mother who was in politics.
What do you think of as Scottish characteristics? I know it's a hard question because I wouldn't like to be put it to me. What are Welsh characteristics?
I don't know that I believe in racial characteristics, you know. I think I believe in individualism, you know, of people more than I do in anything else, although obviously there are certain strands in our history and in our law and just the way we run our lives, I think, which bind us together. I think just now in Scotland, there's a self-consciousness about being Scottish, although, thank goodness, a self-confidence is beginning to grow because we have discovered, or rather we didn't discover, other people discovered it for us, thank heavens, that there is an economic safety net for us now so that we can afford, if you like, to indulge our Scottishness. And we haven't actually just spent all the time contemplating our own navel. I'm beginning to see now the idea of Scotland in relation to other countries. Now that's something new in Scotland. We have been so concerned about looking after our own backyard, but now we're beginning to realise that we're part of the much wider world. So I think that the lack of self-confidence in Scott, which has given rise to an aggression, which was usually, I think, needed a bit of whiskey to fuel it, to be quite honest.
Why I asked you about Scottish characteristics is because if you want Scotland to be independent, which you do, you must actually think there's something very different about Scottish people than, say, Welsh people and English people.
Well, I think there are differences, and they are important. They're perhaps small and very personal and picked out at random. They perhaps don't seem a good enough reason for wanting to break up such a wonderful institution as Great Britain Incorporated. But there are certain things, you know, in the body politic today, and that's obviously the area that I know most about. The National Front is nowhere in Scotland. Now, it really does look as though it's gaining some ground in England. I hope it isn't. I really hope it isn't for, you know, sake of folk in England. But why is it, can you tell me, it isn't gaining any ground in Scotland?
I can't answer that. I mean, but
It's another good reason for us saying...
But then why do you want to be completely independent? Because I have a feeling that the majority of Scots people do not want to be as independent as you.
No, of course they don't. Because you see, the Scots can be British. The Scots know what it is to be British. They can understand what it is to be Scottish and at the same time be part of this conglomerate of nations. And that's good. That's internationalism. That's internationalism at work, the way it should be. But when I talk about independence, I mean the right of the Scots and the responsibility on the Scots of taking the fundamental decisions which will determine how their own country, their own community develops, and how the effects of their decisions reverberate outside their own country. Now, right now in Scotland, you see, we can say anything we like. We can protest till the cows come home, because it doesn't matter. We don't actually have to put our money where our mouth is. Now, you see, that's a sickness in Scotland, that we have been protesters for far too long. And I would like the Scots to take the real decisions. Now, the sort of decisions that they'll take as regards our economic development, our political development, will closely relate to what is happening in England, because no one in Scotland wants to do England down in order to be independent. But it's stupid to imagine that we could take these fundamental decisions, like what sort of economy are we going to have, what sort of industrial structure are we going to have. We couldn't take these without what the SNP defines as being independence.
Margo, I would now like to bring in two new voices who I don't think will agree with you that Scotland should be free. Let me introduce you to Alan Watkins, Robert Carville. And Alan Watkins, I'll put this to you first. Britain seems to me not to be actually getting things right, not like, say, France and Germany are. Don't you think that a series of federal states inside Britain, each with its own drive, might be a good idea?
No, I don't at all. But it's quite interesting that the whole motive of the Scottish National Party as it's developed has been precisely this, and it is not one, as Margo MacDonald said earlier, of national consciousness or national self-confidence, but one of, if you like, greed. And I'm not against greed as such, and I think it's a motive force of any prosperous society, because I believed in the mixed economy, and up to a point I believe in the economic philosopher Adam Smith, that people go after their own economic advantage. But Scottish nationalism has coincided with two things. First of all, the relative failure of Britain economically, and secondly, the discovery of oil around the place, around the coast of Scotland, which the SNP have exploited quite shamelessly and said it's our oil. Of course, paying no attention whatever to the fact that Scotland has been virtually subsidised by people like me, working hard in the southeast and paying their taxes for years and years and years. Same goes for Northern Ireland too. So in a way, I should like to see Margo MacDonald go it alone, but I don't think, I'm happy to say, the consequences would be so happy as she imagines they would be.
Well, what you're really saying, Alan, that we're faced by a most dangerous woman, politically speaking, I think. She's dedicated to destroying the United Kingdom in the way that we understand it. She's dedicated to grabbing stuff that belongs to the United Kingdom and calling it Scottish. In your interview with her earlier on, she talked about Scotland having a new self-confidence because there was an economic safety net. Well, now, those are fancy words for saying that it's Scottish oil. It's not UK oil, and she's going to have it. And the English aren't going to like it. And while I favour some measure of devolution, I think, in fact, what Margo's preaching is the doctrine of separation, the doctrine of conflict between Scotland and England.
Well, Margo, I didn't know you're a dangerous, greedy woman. Answer these gentlemen. You're a dangerous, greedy woman.
I'm terribly dangerous. I'm terribly greedy, because I'm really sick to the back teeth of seeing unemployment figures which show over 200,000 Scots out of work. And if you can justify to me the accusation that it's greed for me and other people in the Scottish National Party to want to see young Scots in jobs and able to lead a decent life in Scotland, then I will accept the charge of greed.
But until you can prove to
me that by managing our economy in Scotland in a much better fashion than it has been mismanaged from Westminster, then I will accuse you of cowardice. You are afraid to face the future. I'll say that you're afraid. You're afraid of losing all the trappings of what was once imperial greatness. Well, I'm afraid that if you live in Scotland, in Strathclyde, where I live, imperial greatness does not feed anybody.
No, I didn't grow up in imperial greatness on the Clyde side myself.
Well, why do you want to keep the United Kingdom as you know it, instead of the United Kingdom as I would advocate?
I want prosperity for the United Kingdom.
Why do you think you can get it when you've failed?
We'll get it.
Pursuing the methods you've pursued for how many generations now?
I think it's unlikely that the United Kingdom in its parts will be any more prosperous separate one from the other.
Can you prove it?
I can see very substantial reasons why if Scotland were to go it alone and have independence, which is what you want, you would need to get more resources from the rest of the United Kingdom than you now have. And in fact, the way you think you're going to get there is dead simple. You just take the oil.
Now, what is the
But
truth?
as of
Alan
now-
was saying that we have been subsidised in Scotland by
yes.
English
That's right.
taxpayers such as himself.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, will you
Yes.
pay us back, please, for all the brains that you have milked out of Scotland?
Well,
to
they went voluntarily.
Well,
I
you
mean,
see,
as Dr.
I hear all
Johnson-
this
Dr. Johnson
claptrap
said,
about why do you Scots want independence? Because come to London, you're all running the big offices here, nothing but Scots. Well, I would like big offices in Scotland for Scots to run. Instead of, if you want to get to the top, do as you did. Leave Scotland. If you wanted to get to the top in your profession, you had to take the high road to London.
It
well,
so
what's
happened
the
that in my
magic about
particular
London?
job, the better jobs were in London. That's
Yes,
true. That isn't true of a great many places in industry at all.
Name
But why
one.
shouldn't Scotland have the good jobs that you had to come to London for?
Because I work in the newspaper industry.
Yeah.
In Fleet Street, the biggest, most successful papers, we used to think they were most successful anyway, financially, are published.
If
and
you were
so
a research
I naturally
chemist.
came to Fleet Street.
Sorry, if
It's
you
as
were a
simple as that.
research chemist with an international combine, where do you think, honestly, you'd be doing your researching?
I don't know much about that particular industry, but
Right.
there is a lot of it in Scotland.
Right, OK, if you were the managing director of an electronics company, where do you think you'd be doing your managing directing?
Anywhere in the world, I suppose.
I don't honestly think it would be in East Kilbride. You'd have your branch factory up there, and you may reach middle management in East Kilbride, but if you were going to the top of the tree, you'd have to come south.
What makes you think that you're going to be all that much more prosperous on your own, running your own little show, presumably against competition from the English? to
Well,
begin with?
you're the people who introduced the very crude terms. You seem to equate Scottish nationalism and the whole rebirth of a community with just merely the discovery of oil. Across
what
the-
I call greed.
Yes, you
No,
called it
politics
greed.
of greed.
Well,
Are
can
you
you tell me
suggesting
why?
that only since the discovery of oil has there been a Scottish National Party?
No,
of course
no. I think
Did
that the
sound like
Scottish
that.
National
That's what it sounded awful like.
I think I did make it, I won't go into what I said, but anyway, it was the second point. The first point was the relative lack of success of the British economy, which I fully acknowledge. But whether the British economy would be any stronger, or whether the Scottish and English economies would be any stronger if they were separate, is a very moot question.
Well, can I explain to you
Yeah.
why we would think it would be?
Yes, by all means.
Right now, and you know this as well as I do, Chancellor Healy, as did the Chancellor before him, as will the Chancellor that follows him, they have to borrow abroad. And at present they are borrowing on the strength of the revenue that's expected from that oil. Now, what we're saying is, if in fact the Scottish economy, which is capable of growing just now, were allowed to grow, because it would be able to channel some of the money directly into it, then in fact other parts of the United Kingdom would feel the spin-off benefits. It's a way of decentralising the whole economic management of the UK. Now that's a very sensible idea which has not been tried. And you gentlemen, with your prejudice against any power moving outside London, you're standing in the way
I've
of
no such prejudice
decentralised
at all.
economic
Of course I haven't. I
management.
said at the beginning that I favour devolution.
Some form of devolution.
Some,
What does
some
that
degree
mean?
of devolution.
Please
I
tell
don't,
me what that
I don't
means.
favour the break-up of the United Kingdom.
What is the United Kingdom?
The United
Tell me what
Kingdom
that is.
consists of the constituent parts of Scotland, England, Northern Ireland and Wales. I hope I haven't got them in quite the wrong order for you. And I want to see them prospering, and I want them to see them prospering together. And I also, if I could just move away from the economic thing for one moment, to the general pattern of life after Scottish independence. Here am I'll be down in England, working in London, I suppose, as an alien, with a work permit, perhaps passport in my pocket, reporting to the police station, getting my foreign currency if I want to go to Scotland
I'm sorry,
on
but
holiday.
you know that's rubbish.
And all that.
If we're
I
all
don't,
inside-
because all these things are things that your own party, Margo,
If
have
you
been
were sent
suggesting.
to Paris by your paper to work just now, would you have to have all these things in Paris?
Yes, not my work permit.
That's right. Would you need to go to the police station every week?
No, I'd need my passport and I need
That's
my
right,
foreign
because
currency.
you'd be inside the
And I
EEC.
certainly need my foreign currency.
And
I
would
need to
that
get
s-
Scottish pounds.
Would that stop you from going to Paris?
No, I would find it rather ridiculous, however, to be moving from Northumberland to Dumfries and
But
going
you've
through all
just
this
made
nonsense.
my point for me. In fact,
Apart altogether
it
from
would be
the
no
customs
barrier
post.
to you at all to ply your trade in Paris or in Brussels or in Edinburgh or in London. If we're all part of the EEC, and I don't want to get into that argument, you know
Well,
fine.
I know you don't, because you don't agree among yourselves, do you,
Of
about
course
that?
we do, of course
You don't
we
even
do.
agree among yourselves about what you are, whether
No,
you're
but,
Tories
no.
or Socialists, do you?
My goodness, I think both these terms are a bit outmoded and most people
Well, what
in the
are you?
country would agree with me. I'm left of centre. I don't want to call myself a socialist in case anybody thinks I'm in like this Labour lot you've got in. Now, one thing I want to ask you. You mentioned you thought the United Kingdom was the constituent parts, Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales. You're quite right. You are so right. Does that presuppose one centralised institution of government? One centralised treasury? Does it? In fact, is the United Kingdom merely the sum total of man-made institutions, or is it a fellowship of the spirit? Is it
not really
shared
much of a
aspirations
fellowship
and
if you
shared
get your way, I
history?
don't think.
I'm the very one that's likely to promote it. You're the person who just now is advocating holding back Scottish development because you think it might be at the expense of the rest of the United Kingdom.
I want us all to live happily together.
Do you think
And
you're going to do that
the
if you're
Scots and
going
English
to...
have been fighting each other for centuries.
No.
We just begun to settle down a wee
No,
bit.
we haven't at all.
I mean, I
because
like the English, except at
you are
Wembley.
frustrating. You're frustrating the whole Scottish community just now if you persist in this attitude. This is, if you like, our time. Do you remember, you'll remember, I don't really remember all that well, but I've read about it. We've never had it so good, the Macmillan era. Well, that never really properly hit Scotland. But by goodness, it hit the southeast of England, right up to the Midlands of England. Well, can you not just use a wee bit of imagination and see that the winds of change are blowing in Scotland just now, and that perhaps this is the time when we will never have had it so good. But we'll have learned the lessons of the Macmillan era, and we'll try to spread the benefits around. Why should we trust that what's been a fantastic bonanza found off the shores of Scotland, why should we trust an English treasury to mismanage it in the way they've mismanaged the rest
maybe
of the
it doesn't belong
Scottish
to
economy?
Scotland in the
Alan
first place.
Watkins.
Sorry.
Yes, to pursue Bob's point about Wembley, you're obviously a humane and very appealing person, which is part of your danger.
Never go to Wembley. Never go.
But,
Hooligans.
I'm worried about this Scottish tendency towards violence. I'm not speaking in the sort of violent nature of the people. You said you weren't a racialist, and in this respect I am, and quite clearly the Scottish are a very violent lot, and they're also a very violent lot when it comes to crime and punishment. And there you go, flagellating children left, right and centre. I shouldn't be at all surprised to see you reintroducing capital punishment, as I believe you'll have the power to do under the devolved system. Could you live with your fellow countrymen and fellow countrywomen in this way? Because they do seem to be highly uncivilised in this regard.
Well, I think you'll find, if you go back through the records, Alan, that the majority of Scots MPs voted against the reintroduction of hanging and so on. And you'll find that as regards all the liberal measures which have been produced in Parliament, the majority of Scots MPs have actually been on the liberal side. And I know you're speaking tongue-in-cheek. I know you're talking about this. You're just mad
So
because
you
we beat you
are.
at Wembley. The Scots, as a race, are no more aggressive than are the English, the Welsh, or the
They
Irish. or
terrorised
anything
Franco's
like it.
police. I was so proud of those Glasgow Rangers supporters. They threw Franco's policemen through the windows.
But
that would be
Alan,
the
why are
hooligans.
you against the idea, which, taking it slightly out of politics, briefly perhaps I am, but why are you against the idea that, that a small unit...
Oh, because I think it is sheer
Because-
political sentimentalism, which hasn't been proved to be true, and I think it's
It's
become...
been proved true in other things. Small units work more efficiently.
I doubt that very much indeed, and I think on the whole that big units tend to work more efficiently. I'm so sorry, but we could go into all sorts of areas here.
Yeah,
But I think this is complete 1970s ecological rubbish.
No,
that,
it's not. Alan, be fair. After the war, the Allies decided that Germany shouldn't ever be in the position again to constitute the threat to Europe, which a centralised,
right, yes.
bureaucratic
Yes,
Germany
Germans,
did.
very
And
good
so
political
therefore,
move, yes.
wait, just now, it was the Allies who decided,
Yes.
Britain in her wisdom decided, we'll make Germany the opposite from ourselves, we'll make her completely decentralised.
Yeah.
And so in fact what they tried to do was graft on a sophisticated form of the old German natural communities.
Yes, but
And
Bonn
they
is
have
still
been-
the capital of the
It's
Federal
true,
Republic,
yes,
which is what I
but
want London to
my
be.
whole point is the German people and the communities inside them, the Bavarians and so on, have found their own way of managing their own resources. Now that's the big thing nowadays. We shouldn't be talking about demand management, we should be talking about resource management. And they've found a way of living with the bigness of Germany. Now that has been successful, and all I'm advocating is just
no,
that
it isn't.
people
You're
like
advocating
you.
independence.
No, okay, because I've thought
Separation.
it. No, I have thought it through. If you don't mind my saying so, a lot longer and harder than you have, because you come up against a brick wall. Your idea of the United Kingdom must mean the Treasury and Westminster, whereas my concept of the United Kingdom has got very little to do with that. It's about people. It's about people with whom I have a great deal in common. It's about people with whom, after Scottish independence, I will still have the same amount in common, and with whom I would like to feel that I had exactly the same sort of social arrangement as we've got just now. But I know that that social harmony is in danger of breaking down if the political answers aren't found to satisfy the Scots.
That's why I want some devolution.
But some
And there is a
revolutions
sense of
are most
remoteness. Of course there
patronising.
is.
Oh, that's got nothing to do
I
with
want
it.
I want it not only for Scotland, I want it for Yorkshire, where there are more people.
Oh, this is a fallacious argument.
This is an argument that's got to actually stop, I'm afraid, because we're running out of time. Thank you all for talking to me, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for responding to this series with all your letters and phone calls. Much appreciated. This is the last programme, so I'll say goodbye, and I wish you well.